Water has always been treated as something inherently safe. From childhood, we learn that drinking water is synonymous with health, purity, and life. It has no strong smell, no color, and doesn't cause immediate surprise. Unlike spoiled food or contaminated drinks, water rarely gives any warning when something is wrong, and that's precisely what makes it so dangerous when something goes wrong. In recent years, a silent fear has begun to spread among scientists, regulatory bodies, and public health experts. A fear that doesn't appear clearly on labels, but emerges in technical reports, laboratory analyses, and discrete investigations. Microplastics being found in water considered potable, traces of heavy metals appearing in natural sources, resistant bacteria appearing in places where they theoretically shouldn't exist. The most frightening thing is that in many cases, the consumer never notices any difference. The water remains clear, the taste seems normal, the body doesn't react immediately, but the risk is there, invisible, silent, and cumulative. Unlike spoiled food, contaminated water doesn't scream. It whispers and enters the body every day. This scenario raises a disturbing question. How can we fully trust the water we drink? And even more, what really happens before bottled water reaches our hands? Bottled water has become a modern symbol of safety. In a world where trust in tap water has declined in many regions, the sealed bottle represents control, oversight, and purity. Millions of people choose bottled water, believing it to be the safest form of hydration. But this absolute trust is rarely accompanied by knowledge. Behind a simple label, words like mineral, natural, or purified hide extremely complex industrial processes. The truth is that bottled water is not just a natural product. It is the result of a rigorous technical chain where each step must function perfectly. A single mistake can contaminate thousands, sometimes millions, of bottles. Unlike other products, there is no room for subsequent correction. There is no cooking process, no final transformation that eliminates the problem after bottling. If the flaw goes unnoticed, it reaches the consumer directly. This is why water is among the most sensitive products in the industrial world. Today, we're going to walk through doors that are rarely open to the public. We're going to enter factories that look more like research centers than production lines. Environments where sensors monitor the invisible, where machines analyze molecules, and where any variation is treated as a real threat. If you believe that bottled water is simply water taken from nature and put into a bottle, prepare to completely deconstruct that idea. Because what's at stake here isn't just hydration, it's health, science, risk, and invisible decisions that affect your body every day. To understand what's really inside a bottle of water, you need to go back long before the label, long before the factory, and even before the bottle existed. It all starts at the source, and that source, contrary to what many imagine, isn't always an untouched and perfect natural setting. Bottled water can come from different sources. Some are deep underground, protected by layers of rock formed over thousands of years. Others come from shallower aquifers, vulnerable to environmental changes. In some cases, the water used undergoes advanced purification systems from common sources. Each of these origins brings specific advantages, challenges, and risks. As soon as the water is collected, it doesn't go straight to bottling. On the contrary, the first step is analysis. Samples are collected and subjected to rigorous testing. Internal laboratories check for the presence of bacteria, viruses, parasites, heavy metals, chemical residues, and microscopic particles. Nothing is presumed safe. Here, science takes complete control. Technicians and equipment work together to identify what the human eye could never perceive. A single out-of-the-ordinary microorganism can compromise the entire operation. And this happens faster than many imagine. After the initial analysis, the water enters the heart of the industrial process. Purification. Mechanical filters remove larger particles. Then activated carbon comes into play, absorbing organic compounds, chemical residues, and unwanted odors. But this is just the beginning. In many modern factories, water undergoes reverse osmosis, a technology so precise that it is also used in the pharmaceutical industry. In this process, water is forced through microscopic membranes that block virtually any contaminant. Heavy metals, bacteria, and viruses are trapped. Only extremely small molecules can pass through. But here's where the tension arises. The pressure needs to be precise. A small error can compromise the membrane or allow impurities to pass through. Sensors monitor everything in real time. Every second counts. After that, there is still disinfection using ultraviolet light or ozone, technologies capable of destroying the DNA of microorganisms. Everything happens in closed systems, away from human contact. Because in this process, the greatest risk is not the water, it's the mistake. And this is precisely where the real difference between a safe bottle and a silent hazard begins. After water goes through the initial stages of purification, many people assume the process is over. After all, filters, activated carbon, and reverse osmosis seem sufficient to eliminate any threat. But in reality, this is where the most delicate work begins, because removing impurities is not the same as ensuring stability. And when it comes to bottled water, stability is everything. Even after purification, water continues to be monitored as a living organism. This is because small chemical or biological variations can occur along the way, especially when large volumes are involved. An industrial reservoir can store hundreds of thousands of liters. If something goes wrong, the impact is not small, it multiplies. The science behind this control is extremely precise. Sensors spread throughout the industrial plant constantly measure parameters: pH, electrical conductivity, turbidity, presence of particles, temperature, and even possible indirect microbiological variations. These sensors do not work in isolation. They are part of an integrated system that compares real-time data with strict standards established by international norms. When the water level approaches a level considered outside the ideal range, the system doesn't wait for human confirmation. Silent alarms are activated, valves close automatically, and the flow is redirected to holding tanks. Not a single drop goes to bottling without the system's absolute approval. Here, the tolerance for error is practically zero. Tensions are rising because the threat doesn't always come from outside. Often the risk lies within the industrial environment itself. A microcrack in a pipe, a valve that doesn't close completely, maintenance performed outside of the ideal time frame. All of these can create microscopic gaps through which contaminants enter a system that should be completely sealed. Therefore, the most advanced factories adopt cleaning routines that seem excessive. The process known as CIP, cleaning in place, uses controlled chemical solutions and specific temperatures to internally sanitize every inch of the piping without the need to dismantle the system. This procedure occurs regularly, even when there is no sign of contamination. But even with all this prevention, water still faces another challenge: time. The longer it remains stored, the greater the risk of subtle changes. Therefore, logistics are planned to minimize the interval between purification and bottling. Every minute counts, and it is at this point that the tension reaches a new level. Because unlike other products, water cannot disguise a problem. There is no aroma that can mask it, no strong taste that can hide a flaw. If something goes unnoticed, the consumer will never know until it's too late. That's why the science applied to bottled water works not only to correct problems, but to anticipate them. Predictive analytics systems cross-reference historical data and identify patterns that indicate future risks. Small variations that would be ignored in other industries are treated as warning signs here. The water continues to flow on, clean, transparent, seemingly perfect. But behind this simplicity lies a constant state of vigilance. A silent battle between absolute control and the invisible risk that insists on existing. Entering the bottling area of a modern bottled water factory is like witnessing a perfectly rehearsed technological choreography. The environment is controlled, silent, and almost clinical. The air passes through special filters. The temperature is kept stable. Every detail has been thought out so that nothing external interferes with the process. The bottles arrive empty at high speed, aligned with millimeter precision. Before even receiving a single drop of water, they undergo a rigorous sanitization process. Jets of filtered air, sterile steam, or even ozonized water clean the inside of each bottle. Any particle of dust, however small, is considered a threat. Optical sensors check each container. If a bottle has a microscopic imperfection, it is automatically discarded. No exceptions are allowed. Then robotic arms position the bottles under the filling nozzles. The water flow is controlled with absurd precision. Milliliters make a difference. While bottling is underway, monitoring systems continue to analyze the water in real time. Purity is constantly checked. If a single parameter falls outside the standard, the entire line can be shut down in seconds. It's not just about protecting the brand, it's about protecting lives. After being filled, the bottles proceed to the sealing stage. Caps are applied with controlled torque, ensuring a perfect seal. Each batch receives a traceable code, capable of identifying the exact minute that bottle was produced. This allows any unit to be tracked from the source to the point of sale. The fascination with this process lies in the scale. Some factories produce tens of thousands of bottles per hour, all identical, all following the same rigid standards. It's a level of repeatability that only advanced automation can achieve. But technology doesn't completely replace the human factor. Engineers, technicians, and specialists closely monitor everything. They analyze data, verify reports, and make strategic decisions. The difference is that now they work in partnership with machines that see beyond human capacity. Another fascinating detail is the final visual inspection. Before being packaged, the bottles go through inspection systems that use strobe lights and high-speed cameras. These machines can detect bubbles, particles, or any irregularity in the liquid. If anything deviates from the standard, the bottle is immediately removed from the line. This level of control is impressive because it contrasts with the simplicity of the final product. For the consumer, it's just water. For the industry, it's one of the most sensitive and closely monitored processes in existence. And while the bottles are on their way to transport, ready to reach the shelves, the vigilance continues. Because in the world of bottled water, the work only ends when the bottle is opened, and even then the risk is never completely forgotten. Even after understanding all the scientific and technological rigor behind bottled water, one inevitable question remains. Is all bottled water really better than regular water? This doubt exists because, over the years, a series of myths have become established in the consumer's mind, mixing marketing, misinformation, and popular beliefs. One of the most widespread myths is that mineral water is always superior. The word mineral carries an almost magical weight. It suggests something natural, untouched and healthy by definition, but the reality is more complex. All water contains minerals. The difference lies in the quantity, type, and stability of this composition. Some mineral waters have high levels of certain salts that, in excess, are not recommended for continuous consumption by certain groups, such as people with kidney problems or hypertension. Another common myth is believing that bottled water never expires. Although water itself doesn't spoil like food, it can undergo changes over time, especially if stored improperly. Prolonged exposure to heat, sunlight, or contaminated environments can affect both the water's quality and the integrity of the packaging. That's why expiration dates exist, and not by chance. There is also confusion between mineral water, natural water, purified water, and water with added salts. To the average consumer, they all seem the same. But industrially, they are completely different categories. Natural mineral water comes from specific sources and maintains its original composition. Purified water, on the other hand, undergoes intensive processes to remove impurities and then receives minerals in controlled quantities to ensure flavor and balance. Neither is necessarily better than the other. They simply serve different purposes. Another point that generates debate is the use of plastic. Many people believe that the simple fact that water is in a plastic bottle automatically makes it dangerous. The reality is more balanced. The packaging used by the industry follows rigorous standards and undergoes chemical migration tests. The problem arises when the bottle is reused repeatedly or stored in inadequate conditions, something that is beyond the industry's control. There's also a myth that bottled water is always safer than tap water. In many countries, water distributed through the public system undergoes controls as rigorous as those in the industry. The difference lies in the infrastructure and trust. In places where the distribution network is old or poorly maintained, the water may leave the treatment plant potable, but arrive contaminated at the consumer's door. It is in this space of uncertainty that bottled water gains strength. Educating the consumer means showing that safety isn't just on the label, but throughout the entire process. Understanding the origin, the type of treatment, and the storage conditions is just as important as choosing the brand. Bottled water isn't a miracle. It's a highly controlled industrial product, subject to rules, limits, and responsibilities. When these myths are debunked, a more mature perspective emerges that safe water is the result of science, oversight, and conscious choices. And this understanding is essential for advancing to the next level of this journey. At the very top end of the bottled water market lies a universe that surprises even the most skeptical, that of premium waters. Bottles that cost more than renowned wines, packaging designed by luxury designers, and stories of almost legendary sources. At first glance, all this may seem excessive. But behind this luxury lies once again science and a great deal of precision. Premium waters typically come from extremely rare sources. Some are located in isolated regions, protected by strict legislation. Others form in deep aquifers, where the water takes decades or even centuries to complete its natural filtration cycle through rocks and minerals. This geological process gives the water a unique composition, impossible to perfectly replicate artificially. Unlike regular purified water, many of these premium waters do not undergo harsh treatments. The challenge here is not purification, but preservation. The industry needs to collect and bottle them without altering their original composition, which requires cutting-edge technology and even more delicate controls. Any interference can destroy what makes that water special. Marketing exploits these stories intensely. Labels speak of remote mountains, ancient glaciers, springs protected for centuries. But it's not all just narrative. In many cases, chemical data confirms real differences in taste, texture, and mouthfeel. Experts can identify these nuances in blind tests, something unthinkable for most people. Another element of luxury lies in control. Some brands analyze their water every few minutes. Others use special glass bottles to prevent any interaction with the liquid. In some cases, transportation is carefully planned to minimize vibrations and temperature variations. All this to keep the water exactly as it came from the source. But there's also a critical side to this market. Not all expensive water is necessarily better. Some brands invest more in packaging and storytelling than in actual quality. That's why understanding the process is so important. True luxury isn't in the price, but in transparency, control, and responsibility. Ultimately, premium waters represent the pinnacle of an idea, that even the simplest product in the world can become extremely complex when the goal is absolute perfection. And this concept naturally leads us to the conclusion of this journey, a reflection on value, trust, and choices. At the highest point in the bottled water supply chain, luxury ceases to be merely aesthetic and becomes a declaration of responsibility. Here we are no longer talking just about beautiful bottles or high prices, but about a level of control so rigorous that it transforms water into an almost philosophical product. It is the stage where every decision carries technical, ethical, and environmental weight. Some of the world's most expensive waters are bottled in extremely limited quantities, not because the source is running out, but because the industry itself imposes limits to preserve the aquifer's natural balance. Pumping excess water can alter groundwater pressure, modify mineral composition, and even compromise entire ecosystems. At this level, luxury is directly linked to restraint. These companies work with ongoing hydrogeological studies. Sensors are installed in the ground to measure variations in water level, temperature, and chemical composition over time. Nothing is done without anticipating the impact. Unlike mass production, here the goal is not volume, but absolute stability. Every liter extracted needs to be scientifically justified. The bottling of these waters follows even more extreme protocols. Many utilize environments classified as clean rooms, similar to those used in the manufacture of semiconductors or injectable medications. The air is filtered several times before circulation, Employees wear special clothing. Human contact is reduced to the bare minimum, all to ensure that the water retains exactly the same characteristics it had underground. Another factor that defines this level is the packaging. Glass replaces plastic not only for aesthetic reasons, but also for its chemical neutrality. Some brands use custom-made bottles with specific compositions to avoid any interaction with the liquid. There are even cases where the shape of the bottle is designed to reduce turbulence during transport, preserving the molecular structure of the water. But the real differentiator of this segment lies in its complete traceability. Each bottle can be traced back to the exact point of origin, the time of collection, the environmental conditions of that day, and the results of the corresponding laboratory analyses. This is not just a technical luxury, it's a way of assuming total responsibility for the product. This level of control also responds to increasing pressure from the modern consumer, who demands more than vague promises of purity. Transparency has become currency. Companies that cannot prove their processes quickly lose credibility. In this scenario, luxury is no longer just exclusivity, it's trust. At the same time, an ethical dilemma arises. In a world where millions of people still lack access to safe drinking water, does it make sense to sell water at exorbitant prices? The industry responds in different ways. Some invest part of their profits in sanitation projects. Others fund research on aquifer preservation. It's not a perfect solution, but it's an attempt to balance market and responsibility. In the end, the extreme luxury of bottled water reveals something greater. When taken to its limit, the pursuit of purity demands not only technology, but awareness. Because controlling water is ultimately taking responsibility for one's own life. After traversing underground sources, laboratories, sensors, filters, machines, and human decisions, we arrive at the final point of this journey, the moment the bottle is opened. A simple, automatic, almost banal gesture. But now, this gesture carries a completely different meaning. The water that trickles into the glass looks the same as always, transparent, silent. But behind that simplicity lies an invisible chain of science, control, and choices. Each sip is the result of processes that most people never see, and perhaps never imagine. We live in an era where trust has become a scarce resource. We trust complex systems every day without realizing it. The electricity that reaches our homes, the food we buy, the medicines we take, and above all, the water we drink. The difference is that water doesn't offer any warning when something goes wrong. This journey through the world of bottled water reveals an uncomfortable truth. Purity is not a guaranteed natural state. It is a goal that is built, maintained, and constantly defended. It requires investment, oversight, and ongoing accountability. Without these, the risk is not hypothetical, it is inevitable. We also learned that there is no simple answer. Bottled water is neither villain nor hero. It is a solution within a larger system, with advantages, limitations, and impacts. In some contexts, it represents safety. In others, convenience. In still others, luxury. Understanding this complexity is essential for making conscious choices. The final reflection is not just about water, but about how we deal with that which sustains life. When we treat something essential as disposable or guaranteed, we lose sight of the effort required to keep it safe. Bottled water, with all its technology and control, is a silent reminder that safety doesn't happen by chance. The next time you pick up a bottle, you might notice something different. You might think about the underground source, the sensors analyzing molecules, the valves automatically closing at the first sign of any risk. You might realize that this simple liquid is, in fact, the result of one of the most rigorous industrial chains on the planet. And that brings us to the final question. In an increasingly complex world, do you know where the things you rely on every day come from? If this journey has changed the way you see something as simple as water, continue exploring the unseen behind-the-scenes world around us. Because understanding how things are made is often the difference between consuming out of habit and consuming consciously.